Because there's tons of times I say something and I'm like, I shouldn't have said that. And now it's going to be, like, recorded forever. But, oh well. So Luke 8, we're going to be starting in verse 40. Okay. You guys ready? Now when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And there was a man named Jairus, who was a ruler of the synagogue. And falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. As Jesus went, people pressed around him, and there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years. And though she had spent all of her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her discharge of blood was ceased. And Jesus said, "Who was it that touched me?" When all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowd surrounding you and are pressing in on you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I perceive that power has gone out from me." And when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all people why she had touched him, and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Okay. So, I know this is probably a story you guys have heard a lot, but I started thinking about it the other day, and first of all, so she had this discharge of blood, which all the scholars think, it had something to do with, like, feminine problems or whatever. So your period for 12 years, like, this is this woman's story. She'd been on her period for 12 years. Like, shoot me in the face. That just is so awful. Like, I can't. It just sounds awful. But to understand her story, we have to understand what that meant for her. Like, you and me, we didn't do anything on our period. Nobody knows that except for the fact that we're super moody and, like, we'll eat people alive. But besides that, nobody knows. We can do whatever. In their culture, because of the laws in Leviticus, which were laws that God gave to his people and were fulfilled in Jesus, so that's another conversation. But for her culture, being on your period meant that you were unclean. No one could touch you. If they touched you, you would make them unclean. Anything you sat on, anything your bed, if anyone touched those things, they were unclean. And to be unclean back then was like a big deal. It was like you were untouchable. It was a big deal. So this woman, for 12 years, not only was struggling with just incredible physical, like just feeling like crap all the time, she was also alone. No one, it doesn't say if she had a husband, but if she did, he couldn't touch her for 12 years. Her friends couldn't hug her. She couldn't go out in a crowd and bump into someone because that would make them unclean. This was an incredible isolation for this woman. And I think 12 years, it's like first grade to senior year in high school. 12 years of feeling like an outsider, alone, isolated. Some of you might know how that feels, 12 years of that feeling. But this was her story. So the word I use for that is shame, and Richie talked a little bit about this last night. But shame being there's a piece of me that's not okay. Like most of the time I feel good, or most of the time I don't feel good, but every single human being has this piece of them that, man, if the world knew about this, it wouldn't be okay. Either it's something I've done, or something that's been done to me, or just a general feeling of like, I'm just not okay, like I'm not, I don't feel right. But every single human has this piece of them that deep, deep, deep down, we're not okay. There's a piece of me that's not okay. I can dress it up, I can act happy, and most of the time maybe I am happy, but there are moments where I feel like someone really knew that about me, they might freak out a little bit. And I'm not talking about like just lame, I watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians when no one else is around. Like, I'm talking about real, like a real feeling of like that's really not okay. So, this girl, she had incredible desperation, and you could hear it in her story. Let me let's go to verse 43. And there was a woman who had discharge of blood for 12 years, and though she had spent all her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. In Mark, when he tells the story, the same like how he saw it happen, he talks about how not only did she spend all her money trying to get better, but she just got worse. From all of the treatments, nothing worked. She tried everything that she could possibly think of to make herself better, to fix herself, to make herself better. She tried everything, and it just got worse. It didn't get any better. It just got worse. So before Jesus, yeah?
I'm sorry, what verse is it? Like, what chapter and verse?
I'm sorry, Luke 8,
Okay.
and then I was in verse 43.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Before she had her meeting with Jesus, she had two choices, right? To tell people about her situation. Look, I've been bleeding for 12 years, you can't touch me, and just be completely alone. I mean, she'd just be honest about it and be completely alone. Or she could hide it. And I feel like we all have the same situation. Like, we could talk to people about stuff, or we could hide stuff. We're talking about outside of Jesus. We talk to people about, this is a part of me that I feel kind of ashamed of. This is something that I've done, or this is something that happened to me, or whatever. This is something I struggle with. We could talk about it and feel very alone, and kind of like people go, whoa. Or we could hide it. And we've been hiders for a really long time. If we talk about, so what happened in the garden, and Richie kind of talked about this last night. Some of you know the story about Adam and Eve in the garden, whatever. They eat the fruit, the apple, the pomegranate, I don't know. I mean, we don't know what kind of fruit it was, but they eat the fruit, and in all the pictures it's an apple. And all of a sudden, what happens after they eat the fruit? I know, go ahead.
Cut off from God.
What's that?
They're cut off from God.
Right. So the scripture says their eyes were open, and in my mind, it went something like this, because it was a nightmare. Like, we read about it in scripture, and we're like, oh, they ate the fruit and their eyes were open. Like, that doesn't mean anything to me. I think what happened, because Eve, like, she's a chick, right? So she's a girl, and we always regret sometimes the things that we do, right? So she does this thing, she eats it, she gives it to her husband, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, what did we do? Like, freaking, I would be freaking out. Oh my gosh, what did we just do? So they run to the woods, they look at themselves, and all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, I'm naked. And it's not okay anymore. Like, all of a sudden I feel like weird about it. Like, it's not, I don't know, maybe it's not good enough, or all of a sudden they're exposed. This feeling of like, oh my gosh. And so they go and get, and I should have pulled them off the trees, but they go and get like branches, which I think is really funny, because they're like, this is better? I'm covered up, this is better. Really, was it? Really, like, it didn't fix anything, but I just think it's funny. It's kind of sad, because they thought that was better, but it's the best they could do, right? Like, they were doing the best they could. All of a sudden they had this incredible feeling of like, okay, now I've done something wrong, and God's about to come into the garden, and man, he's going to be super mad at me, and maybe I've ruined it with him, so I'll just cover up, with these leaves, and maybe they're just trying to figure out the best way they can to fix whatever. So I think that we do the same thing. We reach for things to cover up the parts of us that we want to hide, and sometimes they're silly, but I totally get it, like why we do what we do. So this sense of being unclean is wired in us. Every single person has it. Even if someone looks like they have it together, there are moments when they feel unclean. It's just part of being human. Because in a sense, we are unclean, right? Like, without Jesus, standing before a holy God, there is something unclean about us that needs to be cleaned, right? So it's a good feeling in some ways, like this sense of unclean. You know what I mean? It's true. But then sometimes it gets twisted into things that aren't necessarily true. So, let's see. So the sense of unclean, it looks different for different people. It could be something that you've done that you just don't talk about. Sometimes you have those moments with your friends and you're super embarrassed that it happened to you guys together, and you're like, let's never talk about this. But it could be something awful that you've done, that you really feel ashamed of. It could be something that happened to you that was not your fault, that you're really ashamed of. It could be, when you think about God, why would he like me? I'm really not good. Like, I know myself, and I'm not good. So I don't think me and God are on good terms. Like, he doesn't really like me. It could be with other people. Why would they like me? Or, I know they like me. Of course they like me. But if they really knew this about me, they would be freaked out. So it looks different for different people, but we all have it. And we cover it up with our fig leaves or whatever. And the way you know what yours is one of two ways. A, or one, it is the one thing that if you had it, man, your life would be so good. Like, if I could only have that guy, or those friends, or if I could only get that role in that play, if I could only get into that college, if I could only get that, if I could only be president of that club or captain of that team, or if I could only make this, if I could just make the squad, my life, if I could just have different parents, if I could just have a different face. Like, I don't know what it is, but we all have something that if you could just get it, it would be the answer to your hopes and your dreams. The other way, you know what yours are, is if something is threatened or taken away from you and you freak out. So Friday night there's a party. You want to go to this party really bad. Everyone's going to be there. It's going to be really fun. If you don't go, you're going to miss out. And for some reason your parents are like, you can't go. And you're like, what? Like, you just, like, lose it on your parents, slamming doors, whatever. Which I know, I still do as a grown-up, which is so ridiculous when Kevin's like, my husband is Kevin, and he's like, we can't do that. And I'm like, what? But it's when you lose it and you're like, why am I freaking out like this? Or you don't get the part. You don't get to make it onto the squad. You don't get into the college of your dreams. And it has so much weight, and you're like, I'm really freaking out about this. Why does this matter so much? It matters because that is one of the things, one of many things, that you're using to make yourself okay. You know what I mean? Like, if I was only a better swimmer, if I was only a cheerleader, if I was only whatever, I would be okay. So those are the things that we're holding on to and we're, like, really fighting for. Like this woman, she tried all the doctors. She tried everything. And the thing is if you get the thing that you want, that one thing, if I could just have the perfect body, or if I could just, whatever, if you get that, there's going to be another thing. So it's just going to be, and it's going to follow you for the rest of your life. This is the thing, is when you're 75, there will still be things, and it'll be old lady things, but it'll be things that you're like, man, if I could only have whatever old ladies care about. So it's not something that's just high school, and it's not something that's just college. It follows you through marriage and being a parent and being a grandparent because you're a female, and because you're a human. So this girl, let's see. Well, before I get to this girl, let me just say, some of this is healthy. Like, a little bit of hiding is okay. That's kind of what you do with, like, dating or courting or girlfriends or getting to know your youth director or whatever. Like, you kind of flash little pieces of yourself, and I don't mean, like, flash pieces of yourself, but just, like, you're like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, I think this. What do you think? Are we okay? Like, is that cool or not cool? Oh, not cool? Okay, I'll cover it back up. Hey, I've done this before. Are you okay with me still? Like, am I freaking you out? Can you handle me? Or, you do this little, like, song and dance in relationships, and that's how relationships grow, right? You wouldn't walk up to a stranger and be like, this is what I've done in my life. People would be like, that's a lot of information. But you do this little song and dance with your friends where you just show them glimpses of yourself, and that's good, and friendship should go, and marriage, and all that should go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And let me tell you, I've been married for 7 years, and there are still moments of our marriage where I go to Kevin, I think this. Like, does that freak you out? And we're still getting to know each other more and more and deeper until we know each other fully. And I have to say, like, that's what sex is, right? So you completely undress, literally undress in front of your husband, and you're like, this is me, you know? And he's like, this is me. And that's why sex has to happen in marriage, because it's heart and heart, soul meeting soul, and if you don't have the safety of marriage, then sex will hurt your heart. And I'm not trying to be like naughty sex, like sex is, you know, I'm trying to really impress upon you the full knowing of sex. When you literally stand, you know, with no covering. It's like the complete opening up of your heart and soul for another person. And it has to be in a safe relationship. And it has to be with the promise of, I will love you forever. Or you will get hurt. And you weren't made for that. So that's the sex talk. Okay. So the thing about Jesus, and we're almost to the end. I know it's really short. I'm sorry, guys. I just can't talk for a long time. Jesus doesn't let us just have the thing we want and then go. He loves us too much. Sometimes he gives us that thing we want. Sometimes he doesn't. But if he does or he doesn't, he loves us too much to just let us have it and run. So let's go back to Scripture. Gosh, this part, I mean, is just crazy. So she couldn't be healed by anyone, and she hears about Jesus. And Jesus is the fixer of broken things, right? So she hears about Jesus, and she's like, I got to get to him. I mean, this woman is desperate. I got to get to him. He's going to fix me. So she came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her discharge of blood was ceased. First of all, have you ever been to this show and you want to get to the front row so you can see the band right up close and it's packed in? Can you imagine, like, getting to the front row? You're, like, squeezing through and, like, kind of pushing people aside and rubbing up against sweaty people, like, trying to squeeze through. And you're just, I mean, and sometimes you can't. I mean, sometimes it's so packed. This woman, I mean, she was getting to the front row of a sold-out show. Everyone was here to see Jesus. They were pressing in on him tight, like shoulder to shoulder, body to body, and she was like, I'm getting to him, like whatever it takes. I mean, I don't know if she was like an animal or if she was like really sneaky with it, but she was like, I'm getting to Jesus. So she's pushing through people, which I think it shows how much, how desperate she was. So she gives to Jesus and she touches him and she's going to touch and run, right? Like, Jesus, fix me, and then she's going to run. Which, I mean, of course, right? And Jesus said, who was it that touched me? And when all denied it, Peter said, Master, the crowd surrounding you and are pressing in on you. So Jesus stops and says, who touched me? And this woman wasn't allowed to touch anybody, right? She was unclean. So everyone in the crowd that she wiggled through was now unclean. And then Jesus, I mean, this is like Jesus. She touched him, and she wasn't supposed to. And so he said, who touched me? And you know she's not far away. Like, you can't get out of the crowd that fast. So he said, who touched me? And she's like, I don't know. It was you. It wasn't me. You touched him? Who touched him? I don't know. And, I mean, I would be so scared. My heart would be beating so fast. If I did something I wasn't supposed to do and I knew I wasn't supposed to do it, and then all of a sudden Jesus is like, who did that? I would be like, I don't know. Who did it? I don't know. So this woman, and then he doesn't let up. Like, he wants her. He's not going to let her get out of it. He wants her. So he says, someone touched me, for I perceive that power has gone out from me. And when the woman saw that she was not hidden anymore, she came trembling and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all of the people why she had touched him, and that she had been immediately healed. So, I mean, I get nervous just thinking about it. She's like, okay, you know, this is me. I did it. Like, I can just feel her trembling. I can feel her scaredness. Because how scary is it to be, like, in the front of everybody to talk about your most embarrassing thing? And just be like, take the layers off, completely undress, and be like, this is me, Jesus. I got nothing. This is me. This is who I am. I'm not what everyone thinks. This is me. And I feel for her. I understand how hard that must have been for her. And let's look at Jesus. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." In Matthew, when Matthew tells his story, he says, "Take heart, daughter. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace." And he totally doesn't mention the fact that she was unclean, doesn't slap her for being a sinner. You shouldn't have touched me. He meets her, and I'm so jealous when I read her story because she got to look in his eyes. And he turned around to her and looked her in the eyes and said, "Take heart, daughter." And in his eyes, you know it. No one can love like Jesus does. No, even my husband, who is like, great, can't love like Jesus does. And so to look Jesus in the eyes and to feel eternal love to the bottom of your soul by a man who knows everything about you, good and bad. I'm just so jealous she got that, but we will get our turn. In heaven, you will see his eyes. He will look you in the face, and he will say, "I love you." And you will get to feel the feeling of being completely exposed before the king and being loved. We live for that day. I mean, daughters of the king, we live for that day. That is the day where your life, it'll be the best day of your life. Like, forget graduation from college or wedding or having a baby or whatever. The best day of your life is the day that you will look your maker, your savior, your lover, your friend in the eyes, see the scars on his hands, and him see all of you and say, "I love you." So her story to me is very, very awesome. In the meantime, since we don't get that until heaven, we can be that for each other. You can be Jesus to your friends as they expose parts of themselves and risk, this is me, like, it's messy, are you ready? It's a little bit messy, like, you're going to be freaked out a little bit. You can love your friends well. I mean, I have girlfriends that do this for me, and they don't do it perfectly, and I have a husband that does this for me and doesn't do it perfectly. But we work through it, and I don't do it perfectly to them. I mean, sometimes people will tell you things, and you're like, that's a lot of information. But you love them enough to walk through it with them and look them in the face and say, you are so loved. We can be Jesus to each other. Little things like who you sit with at lunch. There's something about sitting down with someone that says, you're worth my time, I'm interested in you, you're valuable. So little things like who you sit with can show people how they're accepted. Like, you're not perfect. You know, maybe there's weird things about you, there's weird things about me, but I'm willing to sit with you and get to know the real you. Getting to know the real you is a big deal. Like, how good does it feel to have someone know the real you, be able to handle you, like not be overwhelmed by you, and who you really are and still love you. We can do that for each other. So if you guys have a chance to think about it tonight, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the things we use to like hide ourselves. I'm not giving you homework, so please don't stress about this, but if you just happen to think about it, like as you're falling asleep, think about the things that really are those one things, like if I had that one thing, my life would be better, or this is the thing I'm most scared about having taken away from me. Like if I even think about it getting taken away from me, it kind of freaks me out a little bit. Because we are going to talk about, and I'm not going to ask you to share, no, I'm not going to ask you to share anything, but I just want you to have it in your mind as we talk about it, because things like that are going to follow you forever, you know, till you're old, and we need to know how to wrestle with those things and how to like use them with health and use them in light of the cross. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But do you guys have any questions? We're like 10 minutes early. You guys could do whatever you want. But does anyone have any questions or any comments or anything they want to say? Okay. And I will say, if you guys have questions for me, I mean, I'm not an expert on life by any means, but I am very, very willing to just talk. So I'm available on campus or whatever, and I could give you my email or my cell if you wanted to text. But yeah, I'll put that information up tomorrow, and we can go from there. So y'all are dismissed if you don't. Let me pray, and then y'all are dismissed. And let me stop this.